Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I'm a junior in high school and keep my head down to stay out of trouble. My parents raised me to be respectful but also to stand up for myself when necessary. I work part-time at a local grocery store to save up for college, and I always pack my own lunch because the cafeteria food is expensive and, honestly, pretty terrible. Every day I bring the same thing: a sandwich, some chips, an apple, and my favorite chocolate pudding cup that I buy with my own money. The teacher in question had been at our school for about 15 years. She taught advanced placement history and had a reputation for being incredibly strict and playing favorites. Her daughter was in 8th grade at the same school, and everyone knew that this kid got away with everything because of who her mom was. The daughter had been caught cheating multiple times, bullying younger students, and even stealing from lockers, but somehow never faced any real punishment. It was one of those perfect spring days when you could feel summer approaching. I was sitting at my usual table in the cafeteria with my two best friends, just enjoying our lunch break and scrolling through memes on our phones. We were laughing about some ridiculous video when I noticed the teacher's daughter walking towards our table with that smug look she always wore. The daughter walked up to me with this entitled attitude and told me that her mom said I should give her my pudding cup. She claimed her mother thought she deserved it more than I did. I looked up from my phone, completely confused. This was so random and bizarre that I thought maybe she was joking. I told her that her mom was my teacher, not the pudding police, and that this was my pudding cup that I bought with my own money. I politely declined to give it to her. The daughter's face immediately twisted into an angry pout. She clearly wasn't used to being told no. She then told me that her mom said all students should always be nice to her because it was supposedly a rule. My friends and I exchanged looks. This was getting weird fast. Before I could respond, I saw the teacher herself walking over to our table with that stern expression she wore when she was about to lecture someone. The teacher approached me and declared that her daughter was a guest in the cafeteria and that it was only proper for me to share my pudding cup with her. This was like something out of a bad movie. I respectfully explained that while I understood she wanted me to be nice to her daughter, this was actually my lunch that I bought and packed myself, and I would like to eat it. The teacher's face turned bright red, and I could see the anger building in her eyes. She became furious and demanded to know how I dared to speak back to her. She yelled that I would do exactly as she said right now. The entire cafeteria was starting to notice the commotion. Other students were turning to look at us, and I felt my face getting hot with embarrassment. I apologized again but said that I couldn't give away my lunch, emphasizing that it wasn't personal against her daughter. That's when it happened. Without any warning, the teacher raised her hand and slapped me hard across the face. The sound echoed through the cafeteria, and suddenly everything went dead silent. I shouted in shock, asking what that was for. My friends were staring with their mouths open. Other students had stopped eating and were gaping at what had just happened. One of my friends exclaimed in disbelief that she had just slapped me over a pudding cup. Within seconds, the school security guard came rushing over. He must have heard the commotion or seen what happened. The security guard asked what was going on and said he had heard yelling from across the cafeteria. The teacher immediately pointed her finger at me with this dramatic, victimized expression. She accused me of assaulting her daughter and demanded that I be suspended immediately. I felt like I was in some alternate reality. Assault? Really? I protested that I didn't assault anyone and that she was the one who slapped me because I wouldn't give her my pudding cup. The security guard asked if that was really what had happened. My friends both nodded vigorously and confirmed that they saw the whole thing. They told him that she had slapped me just for not sharing my food. The security guard looked between the teacher and me, clearly trying to process this ridiculous situation. He decided that everyone needed to come with him to the principal's office so they could sort this out properly. So there I was, walking to the principal's office with a red handprint on my face, carrying my uneaten pudding cup, and wondering how my regular Tuesday had turned into this insane drama. Principal Johnson was known for being fair and level-headed. He listened carefully when I explained exactly what had happened, from the daughter's demand to the slap. The principal said this was certainly an unusual situation and that he needed to speak with the teacher to get her version of events. I thanked him and said I just wanted this resolved since I didn't do anything wrong. When the principal returned after speaking with the teacher, his expression was serious. He told me that she was maintaining that I was the aggressor and that she was defending her daughter. However, he wanted me to know that they took these allegations very seriously and would be conducting a thorough investigation. Over the next few days, word about the pudding cup incident spread throughout the entire school. Students I barely knew were coming up to me, asking if it was true that a teacher had slapped me over a snack. Some thought it was hilarious. Others were outraged on my behalf. One of my friends joked that I was like a legend now, the kid who got slapped for defending his pudding. But the teacher wasn't done. 3 days later, I was called to the principal's office again. This time, there was a police officer waiting there. The police officer introduced himself and explained that he was there because they had received a formal complaint about the incident. He said the teacher was claiming that I had physically threatened and assaulted her daughter. She had actually called the police and was lying about what happened. I told the officer that her claims were completely false. I explained that I never touched her daughter or threatened anyone, and that all I did was refuse to give away my food before she slapped me. I mentioned that my friends saw everything. The officer assured me that they would investigate this thoroughly. He said they would be reviewing any security footage and interviewing witnesses. The investigation took about a week. During that time, I had to deal with the stress of potentially facing charges for something I didn't do. My parents were furious about the situation and hired a lawyer just in case. Finally, the police officer returned to school with Principal Johnson. This time, he was smiling. The officer told me he had good news and that they had reviewed all the security camera footage from the cafeteria. He said it clearly showed exactly what happened. As the teacher approached my table, there was a brief conversation, and then she slapped me. He confirmed there was absolutely no evidence that I threatened or assaulted anyone. Principal Johnson announced that the teacher had been placed on administrative leave pending further disciplinary action. He also formally apologized for what I had gone through. The police officer told me that they would be filing charges against the teacher for assault. He emphasized that what she did was completely inappropriate and illegal. 2 weeks later, I found out that the teacher had been fired from her position. She also ended up pleading guilty to assault charges and had to pay a fine and attend anger management classes. The school district ended up giving me a formal apology and a small settlement to avoid any potential lawsuit. I used that money to buy a whole case of pudding cups and shared them with my friends during lunch. I'm a police officer and K9 handler. After 15 years on the force working with German Shepherds, I decided it was time to move somewhere quieter. My 2 retired police dogs and I found this perfect little neighborhood with nice houses and peaceful streets. Or so I thought. After spending years in a cramped apartment near the precinct, I finally saved enough for a house with a decent yard where my dogs could enjoy their retirement. These weren't just any dogs, they were my former partners who had served alongside me for years. One helped catch dozens of drug dealers, and the other was part of our bomb detection unit. They deserved a peaceful retirement after their years of service. The first week was great. My dogs would play in the backyard, occasionally barking at squirrels or when the mailman came by. Nothing excessive, just normal dog behavior. I was finally relaxing after years of high-stress police work. Then I met her. I was outside watering my plants when this woman walked up my driveway like she owned the place. She had that look, you know the one. The I need to speak to your manager haircut and the attitude to match. She asked if I was a new owner, and when I confirmed I had just moved in last week, she immediately introduced herself as the president of the Homeowners Association. Without any pleasantries, she launched into complaints about my dogs and demanded we discuss them immediately. I hadn't even introduced myself yet, and she was already making demands. When I asked what about my dogs, she went on about their incessant barking driving away potential buyers in the neighborhood. She demanded to know if I had any idea how much property values mattered there. I looked at my dogs, who were quietly lying in the shade. They hadn't barked once during our conversation. I apologized and said they really weren't that loud, promising to do my best to keep the noise down. She told me I'd better, saying this was a respectable neighborhood, not some dog park. She turned and walked away without even telling me her name. But it wasn't over. The complaints started the next day. First, it was a formal letter slipped under my door about noise violations. Then came the emails, long dramatic essays about how my dogs were single-handedly destroying the neighborhood's reputation. According to her, my dogs barked from dawn to dusk, which was complete nonsense. After 2 weeks of constant harassment, I decided to install a security camera in my backyard. I needed proof that my dogs weren't the monsters she was making them out to be. The footage showed exactly what I expected: two well-behaved dogs playing occasionally and barking maybe 3 or 4 times during the entire day. Nothing even close to what she was describing, but the complaints kept coming. Now she was finding fault with everything. My garden gnome was inappropriate, my front door color was garish, and apparently my trash cans were positioned wrong. It was like living under a microscope. Things escalated when she started showing up at my door unannounced. She told me she'd been timing my dogs barking and claimed they made 47 minutes of continuous noise that morning. I said that was impossible because I was home all morning and they barely made a sound. She asked if I was calling her a liar. I said I was suggesting she might be mistaken. She claimed she had witnesses and that the entire street was fed up with me. She stormed off, but I noticed she never provided any actual witnesses or evidence. 3 weeks into this nightmare, something happened that changed everything. I was lying in bed around midnight when I heard rustling in my backyard. My police instincts kicked in immediately. I grabbed my flashlight and looked out the window. There she was, sneaking around my yard in the dark, throwing something near where my dogs usually played. My blood ran cold. After years of police work, I'd seen enough cases to know what this looked like. I watched her toss several chunks of what looked like meat before hurrying back to her house. I called 911 immediately. I identified myself to the dispatcher as Officer Johnson with my badge number and reported that I just witnessed my neighbor trespassing on my property and throwing what appeared to be poisoned meat intended for my dogs. The dispatcher assured me officers were on the way and instructed me not to approach the suspect or the materials. I went outside to check what she'd thrown. Sure enough, there were several pieces of meat scattered in my yard. They had a strange smell and color that made my stomach turn. In 15 years of police work, I'd seen enough poisoning attempts to recognize one. I carefully collected the evidence and waited for backup to arrive. My dogs were safe inside, but the thought of what could have happened made me furious. 20 minutes later, I was standing on her doorstep with 2 uniformed officers behind me. I knocked on her door. She opened it, asking what I wanted now and demanding to know if I had any idea what time it was. I told her I'd found something in my yard tonight and held up the plastic bag containing the meat. She claimed she didn't know what I was talking about. I told her to cut the act because I saw her throwing the meat into my yard. She called me delusional and insisted she would never do such a thing. Officer Martinez stepped forward and explained they needed to ask her some questions about her activities that night. She screamed that this was harassment and that she was being targeted because she complained about noise. That's when I dropped the bombshell. I told her there was something she should know. I wasn't just her neighbor with barking dogs. I was a police officer and K9 handler, and I knew exactly what she was trying to do. Her face went white. She stammered that I couldn't prove anything. Officer Martinez told her she was under arrest for attempted animal cruelty and criminal trespassing. She called it ridiculous and insisted we had no evidence. Just then, Officer Chen returned from my backyard and reported finding more meat pieces and what appeared to be an opened container of rat poison in the bushes near the property line. Karen's shoulders sagged when the officers read her rights. She yelled that this wasn't over and threatened to sue all of us. But we all knew it was over. She'd messed with the wrong person's dogs. The next few weeks, the lab results came back confirming that the meat contained enough poison to to kill multiple large dogs. This wasn't some scare tactic, she'd fully intended to murder my animals. During the trial, more neighbors came forward. Apparently, I wasn't her first target. She'd harassed 3 previous families until they moved away. One family's cat had mysteriously died after eating something in their yard. Now we knew why. The prosecutor was thorough. They presented the security footage, the lab results, and testimony from multiple neighbors about her pattern of harassment. Karen's lawyer tried to paint her as a concerned citizen who'd been driven to desperation by noise complaints, but the evidence was overwhelming. When Karen took the stand, she continued her victim act. She claimed she was just trying to protect property values and that the constant barking was making life unbearable. The prosecutor asked why she purchased rat poison 3 days before the incident. She said she had a rodent problem. The prosecutor pointed out that she threw meat laced with this poison into her neighbor's yard where dogs play regularly. She insisted that's not what happened, but the jury had heard enough. The judge was clear during sentencing. He explained that attempted animal cruelty with intent to cause death, combined with her pattern of harassment and the amount of poison used, warranted serious punishment. The evidence showed a calculated attempt to poison animals using a lethal dose of rat poison, and the court took animal cruelty very seriously. Karen was sentenced to 3 years in prison. When she heard the sentence, she completely broke down. She screamed that it wasn't fair, that they were just dogs, and that her life was ruined over some stupid dogs. Even then, she couldn't understand that she tried to murder innocent animals. She had to be carried out of the courtroom when she screamed about the injustice of it all. The neighborhood is completely different now. Turns out most people were afraid to stand up to her before. Now that she's gone, it's actually the peaceful place I thought I was moving to. My dogs are thriving in their retirement, playing in the yard without any fear. The new homeowners association president, a reasonable person who actually lives here instead of ruling through fear, even complimented me on how well behaved they are. I've been married to my husband for 3 years now, and our relationship is amazing. We met in college, dated for 4 years, and got married right after graduation. Everything about our life together is perfect except for one major problem: his mother. From the beginning, she made it clear that she didn't think I was good enough for her precious son. She would make little comments about how I cooked, how I cleaned, how I dressed. Nothing I did was ever right in her eyes. My husband would defend me sometimes, but he also had this weird loyalty to his mom that made him avoid confrontation with her. The real issues started when we announced we were having a baby. Suddenly, she became even more controlling and opinionated about everything we did. She had opinions about what we should eat, how we should prepare the nursery, what doctor we should see. It was exhausting. When Christmas rolled around this year, we decided to host our own celebration at our house. We invited my parents, my husband's dad, and a few close friends. We specifically didn't invite his mother because we wanted one peaceful holiday without her drama. We told my husband's dad not to mention it to her, and we thought we were in the clear. The day started perfectly. I spent the morning cooking while my husband decorated and set up music. Our guests started arriving around 2 in the afternoon, and everyone was having a great time. The house smelled like turkey and cinnamon, and we had Christmas music playing softly in the background. I was finally relaxing and enjoying myself when the doorbell rang again. My husband went to answer it, and I heard his voice change immediately. I knew before I even saw her that his mother had somehow found out about our party and decided to crash it. She walked into our living room like she owned the place, carrying a bag of what looked like her own food. I tried to be polite and greeted her, saying we weren't expecting her today. She responded by saying she couldn't let her son spend Christmas without his mother, and that she brought some real food since she figured I probably didn't make enough. My husband looked mortified, but he didn't say anything. This was typical for him. He hated confrontation with his mother. Karen immediately started taking over. She moved our decorations around, saying they were in the wrong places. She turned off our music and put on her own playlist. She went into our kitchen and started rearranging the food we had prepared. I tried to tell her that everything was already set up the way we wanted it and that she could just relax and enjoy herself. She brushed me off and said she'd been hosting Christmas dinners since before I was born, so she knew how these things should be done. She literally pushed me out of my own kitchen and started reheating her food in our oven. She criticized everything from our choice of plates to the way I had arranged the table. Our guests were starting to look uncomfortable, and I could see my parents exchanging worried looks. When we were all sitting down for dinner, my husband and I had planned to announce the name we had chosen for our baby boy. We were both so excited to share this news with our family and friends. My husband told everyone that we had some exciting news to share and that we'd finally chosen a name for the baby. I was beaming with pride and excitement as I announced that we were going to name him Ryan Michael, explaining that we both loved the name Ryan and that Michael was after my grandfather. But Karen's face immediately changed. She asked what kind of name Ryan was and said it wasn't a family name. She insisted that the baby should be named after his father or his grandfather, specifically after her late husband. My husband tried to explain that we'd put a lot of thought into this name and that we really loved it. But Karen wouldn't listen. She told us we were making a mistake and that the child needed a strong name, not some modern nonsense. She said she wouldn't have her grandson walking around with such a weak name. The whole table went quiet. I could feel my face getting hot with anger, but I tried to stay calm. I told her that we appreciated her input, but this was our decision to make since we were the parents. Karen fired back that we clearly didn't know what we were doing. She said we were too young and inexperienced to make these kinds of choices, and that since she'd raised 4 children successfully, she knew better than we did. That's when my husband finally spoke up. He told his mother that we were adults and could make our own decisions about our child. Karen's face turned bright red, and I could see her hands shaking with anger. She screamed about how we dared to speak to her that way, reminding us that she was his mother and deserved respect. She slammed her fist on the table so hard that all the glasses jumped. Everyone at the table froze. She continued yelling about how she had sacrificed everything for him and raised him to be a good man. And this was how he repaid her, by letting me turn him against his own family. My husband stood up from his chair, and I could see he was finally reaching his breaking point. He told her that was enough, and that she was being completely inappropriate. He reminded her that this was our home, our celebration, and our baby, and that she didn't get to come in and take over everything. Karen shouted that she didn't have to listen to such disrespect. She stood up so fast that her chair fell backward. Then, in what I can only describe as a complete tantrum, she grabbed the edge of our dining room table and flipped it over. The crash was incredible. Our beautiful Christmas dinner went flying everywhere. Plates shattered on the floor, gravy splattered on the walls, and the turkey ended up upside down on our carpet. Everyone jumped back in shock, and my friend's little daughter started crying. For a moment, nobody moved or said anything. We all just stared at the destruction in complete disbelief. This grown woman had just destroyed our entire Christmas dinner because she didn't get her way. My husband told her to get out of our house right now. Karen protested that he couldn't throw her out because she was his mother, but my husband wasn't backing down. He told her that she had just destroyed our home and ruined Christmas for everyone there, and that she needed to leave immediately. He said she wasn't welcome back until she could learn to respect us. He walked over to the door and held it open. Karen looked around the room like she was expecting someone to defend her, but everyone just stared at her in shock. She finally grabbed her purse and told us not to come crying to her when we realized we'd made a huge mistake, then stormed out. My husband slammed the door behind her. We spent the next 2 hours cleaning up the mess while our guests helped as much as they could. My parents were incredibly supportive, and our friends stayed to help us salvage what we could of the evening. We ended up ordering pizza and eating it on paper plates while sitting on the floor of our living room. It's been 3 weeks since that happened, and Karen hasn't spoken to us since. She has been telling other family members that we're terrible people who don't respect their elders. Some of my husband's relatives have been pressuring us to apologize to her, but honestly, I don't think we did anything wrong. We set reasonable boundaries, and she completely lost control when she didn't get her way. We're expecting a baby in a few months, and we can't have someone in our lives who thinks it's okay to have violent outbursts when they're upset. My husband has been much happier without the constant stress of dealing with his mother's drama. He says he feels like he can finally breathe without worrying about her criticism all the time. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.